everyone, welcome to EduKingdom College. My name is Celine and I'll be helping you guys out for your selective high school trial test, specifically focusing on comprehension. So what I'll get you guys to do first is to read this extract in your spare time and we'll answer question 1 together. So question 1, it's better to die on your feet than live on your knees means A, B, C, or D. Firstly, we can note that we have these quotation marks, so let's just go into the text and see where it is. We actually see it in the third last paragraph. So actually Hicks's niece states this, so they're specifically talking about their quad bike activities. So we can talk about how this is risky and dangerous, but the niece offers up some uplifting advice saying, well, it's better to have fun than to live life cowering in fear. That is actually what the phrase means. So in that case, we can see that it's C. Moving on to question 2, Graham's greatest challenge comes from A, B, C, or D. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the extract once again, and we're going to look for challenges. And we see it in the second last paragraph, what other challenges do you face? And it clearly states it has nothing to do with their disability, but prejudice from others and the barriers that result. So considering that this is about his relationships, we can see how it is about other people. So the answer is D. Moving on to questions 3 to 4, once again, I'll get you guys to read these extracts in your spare time. We actually have a collection of reviews here on Top Gear Australia. So we have Joe Fonte, Melissa Nichols, Greg Tripus, and Tony Patman. So question 3, whose letter is most critical of the show Top Gear Australia? I'd like you guys to read the contents of it, but just in general, the very first one is a bit of a comparison with BBC. And also the very last phrase, the first show looks good and can only get better. So it's not a completely positive review, but it's a hopeful review, I would say. Number 2, it's an enjoyable critique. They enjoy watching the show. They like the Australian culture by saying Aussie blokes enjoy seeing our wonderful country. The third one is a little bit critical of the content with the rocks in their heads highlighted. However, in the last sentence, they say, give the show a go and let the boys do their job. So similar to the first review, it's give them a go, just have a watch of the show and see if you like it. But the fourth review, we can even look at it in the first sentence, brash, bigoted, gauche, and Philistine. So this technique is actually listing, and this listing of really horrible, insulting words, and as well as how it continues, it seems we do not have many of ideas of our own, keep stealing shows from the British TV. It's calling Top Gear Australia unoriginal. There's not really any positive points in that review, so we can assume that Tony Patman, is the one that gives the most critical review of Top Gear Australia. For question 4, the original Top Gear is produced in, this is actually mentioned in the first review, so please be mindful when you are reading these extracts because it mentions the BBC, so British Broadcasting Corporation. That's situated in England, by the way. An easy way to weed out some of these answers is by noticing how they don't even mention the USA, Japan, or Italy. So it's one of those questions where you can deduce it very easily. Questions 5 to 7. Once again, I'll get you guys to read this extract in your spare time. Question 5. Why were there animals at the spring with Peter and Gran? So we're going to look in the extract where they mention animals at the spring with the 2 characters, which is around here. Okay. So firstly, there is nothing in the text that suggests that these animals were thirsty or felt like a swim. So we cannot have those answers. D, it was actually humid. And also, this is a very simple answer. It does not actually provide a good enough reason for why they were specifically with Peter and Gran. It does provide reason for why they sought out for shelter, but not for these two characters. Thus, it is A, because they are seeking shelter from this tempestuous brown fog and the overall weather and conditions. Question 6 might be a bit harder to answer. Which of these lines imply that this event had been a turning point in Peter's life? So firstly, we're trying to look for a phrase in the text where it is reflective, specific for Peter. So that's around from here, right? So for years, Peter had detested it, had endured it with a set face and pounding heart. But that had been the way of boy, not the way of a man. So this change in language from boy to man is this maturity. They are literally growing up from young adulthood or teenage years into adulthood. So we can take it from that line that it is C. A and B are both descriptions, so it cannot be that. For D, I know that some of you may consider it because it says, there's that change. It grew cooler and cooler still. However, we're not referring to Peter. We're talking about the weather. If you look at the context of that, which is in the last sentence, so more reason for why it is C. For question 7, predict what happens next in this novel. We should look mainly at the last paragraph or the last event. So let's take a look here. So last sentence, at first it came like her morning shower and she thought it was fire. So we have this very intense weather, but it did not consume her. It grew cooler and cooler still. So the weather is getting better basically because it grows cooler and cooler still. Okay, so we can assume that the danger will pass, and they also sound a bit relief. Thus, the answer would be B. Moving on to our last set of questions, we have a review on Pure, on PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. We can notice that with the stars. So firstly, let's take a look at question 8. So read the paragraph that the word punitive is in this context. In its context, we can determine that it means A, B, C, or D. So that sentence is around here, right? You can take a look at the entire question, but really what we can focus on is the but and the reducing frustration part. Okay, so and thankfully as well. Okay, so but the consequences are thankfully not too punitive, reducing frustration. Firstly, punitive means punishing, okay? So something like a harsh punishment, like a consequence for doing something bad. So B and C in this case, because we have the words, but thankfully, the consequences are thankfully not too easy or gorgeous, reducing frustration, the tone of it being uplifting or at least admirable or beautiful does not make sense. It does not align with the words that we are being given or the tone. So we can take out B and C. A and D we can take a look at them. D, we can consider that, but it is the reducing frustration part, okay? We're saying like, thankfully the consequences aren't too bad, so I'm not very frustrated, okay? So that would completely go against the reducing frustration part. So that's why it's not D. And once again, reviewing the word punitive, it means punishing. So thankfully the consequences aren't too bad, so I'm not very frustrated. So that's why it would be A. When we're looking at question 9, freestyle competition is distinct from races and sprints in that we can take a look at the extract around the beginning when we begin to define what it is. So we have here races, sprints, and freestyle competitions. But specifically, we can talk about this paragraph. All right. So in this paragraph, the goal in freestyle events is to amass points by performing as many tricks as possible before you run out of petrol. Okay, so let's take a look at question 9, and basically we have A, you travel through water. That's not true. B, you're rewarded for saving petrol. That's not true either. And C, emphasis is on speed. There's not anything that's really suggesting that, so we can't deduce that it's C. But it clearly states that the more tricks you do, the more points you receive. So that's why we get D. For the last question, what is the reviewer's only criticism of Pure? Basically, we're being asked to almost summarize what the review is saying. So the entire review tends to be pretty good. Okay, they're saying some pretty good things about it. They're describing it. So the way they are structuring it is almost like, oh, here is what it is. Here's good points A, B, C, and D. And usually towards the end, that's when they do criticism. So that's why we can take a look at the last sentence. More events, track, and vehicle types would have given the game more depth and variety, but the online multiplayer action is certain to be popular. So mainly we can see how multiplayer action would be good for it, but mainly they just want more variety, okay, or more depth, okay? Therefore, it would be C. So those are basically all of the questions for this practice test. So thank you for watching. But very quickly, I just want to do a very quick review. So for example, in the first set of questions, one of the techniques I used was searching for keywords, okay? Under comprehension, this is probably one of the easiest things you could do. If a question has the word challenge or challenges, you can take a look at the text and see where they say challenge or hardship or difficulty, okay? Sometimes it is not always that clear or explicit. You have to read a bit in between the lines. That is where quality/context of your text really matters, okay? So look at the entire sentence instead of just looking for one word, okay? Also consider what they are specifically talking about, because maybe they mention the word challenge, or they talk about a character, in the second text, the character Peter, they speak about it in 3 out of 6 paragraphs per se, right? But only one of those times when they mention Peter is actually where the answer is. So read very carefully and try and see where you can find your answer, okay? And lastly, I would suggest expanding your vocabulary. This can really only be done by consuming more media, so both fictional and non-fictional, also by having conversations. This is a bit of a free-for-all kind of technique. I would just highly suggest engaging with English as much as you can, really. And so those are my tips and my walkthrough for the test we have today. I hope you found it helpful and you received the clarification as to how and why I got those answers. So I wish you guys luck on your next few tests or tasks, and hope to see you again next week.